Hello, fellow students. It is now, it's 2026. I've decided to stick the introductions up on a Saturday now and the full play on a Sunday. It makes more sense to do the introductions before the play, and also because Sunday seems more like a sitting down and watching a play day. That's not the only reason I'm here. What other bonus material can I put on this particular collection of introductions for Titus Andronicus? I thought maybe some more Foley work, but who wants to see a middle-aged man crying like a baby? I don't know. At the bottom, I always link to the blogs that I was writing at the time that I was putting up these videos and rereading them. I really enjoyed this thing I wrote. This is from, where did this from? Whenever it was. That's no good. Well, actually, it's quite, you know. Oh, Simon, you could be doing so much more with this medium. So I'm banging on about whether or not to choose sound design for Titus Andronicus, and then I decide I'd drop all the cues, uploaded the act without flourishes, went for a night walk and began to think more and more about the vintage news march that I'd earlier dismissed as too wacky. I did love how unalien the march had suddenly made Rome, by which I don't mean that it stopped Rome seeming weird, but that it made Rome's weirdness far less easy to write off as alien. It meant I wouldn't be presenting the story as a trip to a faraway savage time, but as a nightmare just a couple of wrong decisions away, in which duty, tradition, processions, seeking for comfort in precedent, the celebration of war, and just the very concept of victory were all complicit and fair targets. And so by the time I got back from my walk, sticking an old newsreel march with no inkling of tragedy through a cathedral effect to lose the crackle, and then playing that over a human sacrifice, felt like getting a lot off my chest, which seemed a valid feeling to have when presenting Titus Andronicus. Bonus material. Enjoy the introductions. I hope you're doing tremendously.
Hello friends, happy new week, happy Monday, happy new play. Not a happy new play at all. The most lamentable Roman tragedy of Titus Andronicus. Now, as I said, I'm going slightly out of chronological order. This is very unlikely to have been the third play Shakespeare actually wrote, but he wrote it as a standalone in between other plays that I'm going to perform over 4 weeks because they form one big, huge history. Many people think it is Shakespeare's least liked play. That's because horror has always been overlooked. That's the easiest way to let you know what we're coming up against. It's horror. It's suspense. It is incredible cruelty being meted out and you screaming at people not to be so stupid. It's set in Rome. So what's Rome? Well, in the first scene, there is both an election and a human sacrifice. That's Rome. The election is for the successor to Caesar. His 2 sons are up for nomination, and the tribunes also want to nominate Titus Andronicus. That's what's going on there. The Romans have just won a battle against the Goths, who sort of lived kind of there. Goths are mentioned, and also, although he doesn't speak yet, Aaron the Moor, which means he came from here. There's a lot of Roman names. You might think I'm never going to keep track of all these. All you have to remember are 2 sons of the emperor, Saturninus and Bassianus. They normally address each other by name. And then the lead character, Titus Andronicus, his brother Marcus, who is a tribune. A tribune is sort of a politician, one of the representatives of the people. And then Titus has many, many sons, but it's all right, most of them are dead. The one to really keep an eye on is Lucius, and he also has a daughter, Lavinia. And hopefully, if you can keep track of Saturninus, Bassianus, and then Titus, Marcus, Lucius, and Lavinia, you should be okay. Let's see, as always. Ta-da! Hello, friends! Happy Tuesday. Sorry the last video was so late going up. I edited it and put it together, and I had been toying with whether or not to add a flourish, and then I went for a walk. I thought, no, I want to add a flourish. I'll maybe talk about my decisions in a blog. But anyway, then it started crashing, and then I just thought, this is taking too long. I'm not going to do sound effects, even though I like using them to build a world. So I don't think I'll add sound effects to this. Maybe some dogs. Also, it will suddenly go literally dark for a few lines because re-editing, I realised I must have deleted the file with those lines on. So I'm re-recording them now. That warning, however, is not really the priority when coming to Act 2 of Titus Andronicus, which contains, at the very least, references to rape and mutilation and also extreme racist abuse meted out against the character of Aaron the Moor, Shakespeare's first big baddie. Don't worry, my North African accent will be as well researched as my Italian accents have been. What else? Oh, well, the story so far, I guess. Titus Andronicus is a general who has defeated the Goths. He's a Roman general. The new Roman emperor, he decided, was to be Saturninus, who's a bit of a handful. Saturninus has immediately married the Gothic queen, Tamara, who has two sons, Chiron and Demetrius. Tamara wants huge revenge on Titus because as part of the victory celebrations, Titus Andronicus had her eldest son sacrificed. Also, Titus killed one of his own few surviving sons after he was trying to protect his sister, Titus's daughter Lavinia, who the emperor wanted to marry. But now she's married to the emperor's brother, Bassianus, which is what was agreed between them. But as a result, Titus is not really in Saturninus's good books. We've had the wedding and everyone is going for a hunt organised by Titus, who I think really loves hunts. What's following is horrible, but enjoy. Ta-da! Hello, friends! Happy Hump Day, which is very much what Act 3 of Titus Andronicus feels like. Does that mean we're over the worst of it? Well, yes and no. It's very weird to be doing an act a day with something like this because we come straight into the emotion of Act 2, generated by the story so far. Titus Andronicus had 25 children, 5 at the beginning of the play. 1, a son, he murders while the son was trying to protect his sister Lavinia from being taken away by the Emperor Saturnine, who now dislikes the entire Andronicus family. 2 more of Titus's sons have now been framed for the murder of Lavinia's husband, Bassianus. Lavinia herself, on the advice of a complete villain called Aaron, has been raped by the emperor's sons-in-law, Chiron and Demetrius. Titus' brother Marcus then finds Lavinia with her tongue cut out and her hands cut off to stop her telling anyone what happened to her or who did it. So Titus's children now number 4, Lucius, Lavinia, and Quintus and Marcius, framed for Bassianus' death. And then we go straight into it. Oh, and Aaron reappears in this scene, so there'll be lots of people saying lots of horrible things about the colour of his skin. Be warned about that. I just want to pick up on a detail I said in the video to Act 1 when I said this was seen as Shakespeare's least liked play. That's not true of the time that it was written. It was hugely popular. This act might give you some idea why, because there are a lot of tropes in it that continue to be popular to this day. We'll see what you think. Enjoy. Ta-da! Hello, friends. Happy Thursday. Continuing with Act 4 of Titus Andronicus. The story so far, how much do we need to know? Horrible, horrible things have happened to the family of Titus Andronicus, which is now reduced to Titus, his brother Marcus, Titus's daughter Lavinia, who is now missing her tongue and her hands, and Titus's grandson, Lucius. The elder Lucius, Titus' son, has been banished for trying to rescue his brothers who were being executed, having been framed for the murder of Lavinia's husband, Bassianus. On the advice of Titus, older Lucius, in his banishment, has joined up with the Goths in Syria to form there's another way of putting it, a rebel alliance to defeat the emperor. Yesterday, when I talked about tropes from this play that still survived, I was referring to the idea of the old soldier who's been pushed too far and has now steeled himself, which is what happened in the last act. However, Titus, having steeled himself, appears to have completely lost his mind. Probably didn't help that he was persuaded to chop off his own hand to save his son's life, and that just turned out to be a massive practical joke played by Aaron. In the Roman court, we have the Emperor Saturninus, his wife Tamara, formerly the Queen of the Goths, her sons Chiron and Demetrius, and also her lover, Aaron, who has a lot to do in this act, so there will be more racist abuse meted out against him, to warn you about that. Anything else you should know? Dam means mother. It's just a word that comes up a lot, so when people talk about the dam, they mean the mother. A clown enters. Now, a clown obviously doesn't mean or even a jester. Basically, it means the part you would give a clown. So, like Lee Evans in The Fifth Element or David Schneider in Mission Impossible. And there is a line missing from this act. Now, when I've seen productions on the television, they just cut this line. But I think that gives a false impression that Marcus is advising his cousins to actually leave Rome and join the rebel alliance in the Goths. And I think he's actually just telling them that Lucius is forming one. So I'll use some static to cover that line rather than cut it completely. I think we get through... No, I was going to say I think we get through the whole act without any deaths. There are actually 2 deaths. See if you can guess who's going to die before the end of the act. Enjoy. Hello, friends. Happy Friday. Nearly there. The fifth and final act of Titus Andronicus. Trigger warning. Lots more racist abuse heaped on the villain Aaron. Aaron, who in yesterday's act took charge of the child that he'd had with the Empress Tamara and fled to the Goths hoping for sanctuary. Also with Rome's enemy, the Goths, is Titus Andronicus' banished son Lucius, hoping to form a rebel alliance to attack Rome and avenge his family. Titus Andronicus himself, meanwhile, appears to have completely lost his mind, seeking out the actual personifications of justice and revenge from heaven and hell by shooting arrows into the sky. The Empress Tamara is absolutely loving this, loving driving Titus to madness and death. However, the paranoid Emperor Saturnine, her husband, thinks it's all just a great big put-on. Saturnine is also terrified of Lucius, so has asked for peace talks, which will take place at Titus's house. And I think that brings you all up to date, and we can now continue with the fifth act of Titus Andronicus. We've made it, guys. Enjoy. Ta-da! And that, dear friends, was Titus Andronicus. Next week, change of plan. I'm not going to launch into a 4-week season of Shakespeare's early histories because I'm going to take a break because I think that makes sense. I'm going to take a break after next week, though. Next week, I'm going to do the play I thought I might start with, Julius Caesar. We're jumping ahead in the chronology, but I've already gone a bit out of chronological sequence, and it's set in Rome as well, so it might be a nice counterpart, but a little bit quieter. So yes, there will be Act 1 of Julius Caesar. Once I've done it, there is Act 4 of Titus Andronicus. Thank you so much for watching. Tips, comments, all very, very welcome. Have a great weekend. I hope you're all doing tremendously. Goodbye.